Toyota wasn't supposed to be here this late. That's what everyone thought. For years, the entire auto industry looked like a race that had already been decided. Tesla was dominating headlines. BYD was flooding markets faster than anyone expected. Every month, there was another electric car launch, another futuristic promise, another company claiming they were building the future first. And in the middle of all that noise, Toyota stayed strangely quiet, which didn't make sense, because this is the same company that built one of the most reliable automotive empires on Earth. Same company that changed the industry with hybrids long before most. Companies even took EVs seriously. So people started asking the obvious question. Was Toyota falling behind? At first, it honestly looked that way, while competitors were chasing giant screens, self-driving demos, and record-breaking acceleration numbers. Toyota kept talking about hybrids, practicality, reliability, fuel efficiency, things that suddenly sounded. Old investors got nervous. Critics got louder. Some people even said Toyota had completely missed the electric revolution. But then something changed. Toyota quietly revealed a new electric SUV, the 2026 CHR-EV, and almost immediately, the conversation shifted. Not because it was the fastest EV ever made, not because it had some impossible futuristic feature, but because of what it represented. A dual-motor setup, standard all-wheel drive, aggressive futuristic styling, competitive pricing around $37,000. On paper, it looked like Toyota had suddenly stepped directly into the same battlefield as the Tesla Model Y. Not the strange part. The strange part is how calculated the timing feels, because the deeper you look into Toyota's strategy, the harder it becomes to believe they were ever late at all. And this is where the story starts getting uncomfortable. See, most companies rushed into EVs because they were afraid of missing the future. Toyota didn't. They slowed down on purpose. At the time, that decision looked almost embarrassing. Tesla was becoming the symbol of innovation. BYD was scaling globally at a terrifying speed. Governments everywhere were pushing electric adoption harder every year. And Toyota just waited while everyone focused on who was selling the most EVs right now. Toyota appeared to be studying something else entirely. Infrastructure. Because outside major cities, charging was still inconsistent. Long-distance EV travel still made some buyers nervous. Battery replacement fears were everywhere. And Toyota understood something most companies didn't want to admit. Publicly, the average driver still wasn't fully ready. So instead of forcing customers into full EVs immediately, Toyota used hybrids as a bridge. And that decision quietly became one of the smartest moves in the industry. Millions of people who weren't ready for full electric cars still bought hybrids. They became comfortable with battery-assisted driving without changing their lives completely. Toyota kept earning trust while everyone else fought for headlines. At the time, it looked conservative. Now it looks strategic, because while other companies were spending massive amounts trying to dominate the present, Toyota may have been preparing for the next version of the market entirely. And the key to that plan isn't the car itself, it's the battery right now. Most electric vehicles rely on lithium-ion technology. It works well, but it still comes with compromises. Charging times, heat management, long-term degradation cost. Toyota knows all of that. Which is why, behind the scenes, the company has been heavily investing in something far more important than this SUV: solid-state batteries. At first, that phrase doesn't sound dramatic, but the implications are massive. If solid-state batteries work at scale, they could completely reset the EV industry. Faster charging, longer range, better safety, smaller battery packs, less degradation over time. In other words, the companies dominating today's EV race could suddenly find themselves competing in an entirely different game tomorrow, and Toyota seems willing to wait for that moment. That's why the CHR-EV feels different from a typical launch. It doesn't feel like Toyota trying to catch up. It feels more like Toyota establishing a position before the real transition begins. And once you notice that, everything about this car starts looking different. Even the pricing, because $37,000 isn't random. Toyota knows exactly where the pressure points are in the EV market right now. Tesla still owns enormous mindshare, but affordability remains a challenge for many buyers. BYD is winning aggressively on cost. But long-term trust in some markets still isn't fully established. Toyota enters right between them, not the cheapest, not the flashiest, but possibly the safest choice for people who want an EV without feeling like beta testers. That's Toyota's entire identity, reliability over hype. And honestly, that approach sounds less exciting until you remember how most consumers actually buy cars. Most people don't wake up wanting experimental technology. They want something that works every morning, something that survives years of ownership without becoming a problem. Toyota built its empire understanding that better than almost anyone, which is why the EV's design matters more than people think, because visually, this doesn't look like Toyota playing defense anymore. The SUV looks sharp, aggressive, futuristic, slim LED lighting, coupe-inspired roofline, wide rear stance, the kind of styling that immediately tells people Toyota knows modern EV buyers care about identity just as much as practicality now, and that creates a strange contradiction. For years, Toyota was viewed as the cautious company, but suddenly, they're launching a vehicle that looks more aggressive than many competitors that built their entire image around innovation. That shift feels intentional, especially when you compare it directly against Tesla. Tesla's design philosophy is minimal: smooth curves, clean surfaces, understated styling. Toyota went in the opposite direction. The CHR-EV wants attention. It wants road presence. It wants people turning their heads. And that difference reveals something bigger. Happening underneath this competition, Tesla is still fundamentally a technology company. Toyota is still fundamentally a car company. That distinction matters more than most people realize, because Tesla's strength is software, AI, charging infrastructure, and ecosystem integration. BYD's strength is manufacturing scale and battery cost control. Toyota's strength is trust accumulated over decades. Three companies, three completely different philosophies, and eventually, one of them will define the next stage of the EV market. But this is where things get even more interesting, because despite all the excitement around the Toyota still isn't pretending the car is perfect. The charging speed is good, but not industry-leading. Tesla still wins there. The software experience isn't as advanced. Tech-focused buyers will notice the difference immediately. And because of the dual-motor AWD setup, efficiency takes a slight hit compared to lighter single-motor EVs. Normally, those weaknesses would hurt excitement instead. They almost reinforce Toyota's credibility, because Toyota isn't selling fantasy. They're selling balance. And weirdly enough, that may become more valuable as the EV market matures, because early adopters tolerate experimentation. Mainstream buyers usually don't. The average person doesn't care if a car feels revolutionary for 2 months. They care if it still works properly 8 years later. Toyota understands that psychology better than almost anyone in the industry, which leads to the most important question of all. What if Toyota never wanted to win the first phase of the EV race? What if the company intentionally allowed competitors to spend years building charging networks, educating customers, normalizing electric vehicles, and absorbing the early risks, while Toyota quietly prepared for the version of the market that comes after all that? Because if solid-state batteries actually become viable at scale, the balance of power could shift incredibly fast, and suddenly, Toyota's slow strategy may stop looking slow. Altogether, it may end up looking patient, which is a very different thing, and Toyota knows patience better than almost any company alive. This is a company that built its reputation slowly, quietly, over decades, not through flashy launches, not through viral announcements, but by making cars people trusted enough to buy again and again, which makes the CHR-EV feel less like a sudden reaction and more like the beginning of a much larger move. Because once you stop looking at this as Toyota finally making an EV, you start noticing something else. Toyota isn't trying to beat Tesla at Tesla's game. That would be impossible. Tesla's advantage isn't just cars anymore. It's software ecosystems, charging infrastructure, data collection, AI development, entire communities built around the brand. Even now, Tesla still feels closer to Silicon Valley than Detroit. And competing head-on against that would force Toyota to become something it's never been: So instead, Toyota is doing something much smarter. It's changing the battlefield itself. And you can already see hints of that strategy inside the CHR Eve. The car doesn't overwhelm buyers with experimental features. It doesn't feel like a prototype disguised as a production vehicle. Everything about it feels measured, controlled, familiar enough to trust, but modern enough to feel relevant. That balance is extremely difficult to achieve. Because one of the biggest problems in the EV industry right now is that companies are designing cars for headlines instead of ownership. Huge screens, touch-sensitive everything. Features people show off for 2 weeks and stop caring about later.